Today, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into metabolism. So what is it? What can we do to make it faster? What are things that tend to make it slower? And we're going to give you some practical takeaways on how you can increase your metabolic rate, what can be expected, and do some myth busting around this, because this is a little bit of a hot topic, a bit of a buzzword. People really use this in their marketing to try and sort of pressure those pain points into paying for dietary protocols claiming to sort of boost metabolic rate. So what we're going to get into first is, what actually is metabolism? Metabolism has three main components, okay? So basal metabolic rate, roughly 70% of your metabolism, makes up 70% of the calories that we burn on any given day. This is the calorie expenditure required to basically just lie down, sit still, not move, not do anything. Just being alive, basal metabolic rate. Next up, we have the thermic effect of food, all right? Now, this is going to be the energy required in order to extract and digest your food. So extract the energy and digest the food in your digestive tract, okay? This is going to be roughly 10% of total daily metabolism, okay? And then the third point is going to be your exercise activity, okay? So physical activity. This is going to be both exercise, deliberate exercise, and NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is fidgeting, walking, this kind of thing. So now that we know the components of metabolism, we're going to dig into, is a slow metabolism the reason that you are struggling to lose weight? Well, statistically speaking, it almost certainly will not be. So to give you an example here, if you're sat here thinking, I'm eating 1,200 calories, I'm 100 kilograms or whatever, and I can't lose weight, I have good news for you. You don't have a slow metabolism. What you have is a low level of adherence. You are eating more calories than you think you are. In the last decade, I have coached well over 1,500 fat loss clients, and I've never seen a single one get to the point where it was their metabolism holding them back, okay? Now, we can look at some research in order to back up this point. If we take the three studies in the literature with the greatest degree of metabolic suppression, so people that reduced their metabolic rate by the most drastic amount, we have three studies: the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, the Race Across America study, and then also the Biggest Loser study. You might have seen there was a Netflix documentary on this recently, which obviously didn't paint it in the best of lights. So in some of these studies, we saw an average of 1,600 calories per day suppression from start to finish in terms of metabolic rate, okay? And even those people in those extremely suppressed situations, every single one of them would have still lost weight on 10 calories per pound of body weight. So if you're a 120-pound person, you would still have been losing body weight at 1,200 calories per day. So often over the last decade, I've had people sit in front of me and say, I'm eating 1,200 calories and I'm not losing weight. Is my metabolism broken? And the take-home message from this is that no, your metabolism is not broken. It might be very slightly suppressed if you have spent your whole adult life trying to diet, okay? If you go one diet to another, constantly in a calorie deficit, your metabolism will slow as a bit of a protective mechanism. Otherwise, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, if, when we were cavemen, we went from summer to winter, dropped 200 calories, we just continued losing weight until we withered away and died, that wouldn't be great from, a survival perspective. So we slow down the rate at which we burn through our fuel, and that is metabolic slowing. However, the thing that causes most of that metabolic slowing is not your body just adapting and burning less calories per pound. It is simply having fewer pounds, okay? So if I am a 90 kg guy and I lose 20 kilograms, I am going to burn fewer calories doing my 10,000 steps per day, okay? Because there's less of me to lug about. I'm gonna burn less energy. I've got less metabolically active tissue to lug around and fuel, and I've also just got more weight to carry around, so I'm carrying and having to burn more calories just to move about, okay? So metabolisms can slow, but they tend to slow by a much smaller degree than we would expect, okay? And most of it is just due to weighing less, all right? So it's very, very hard to avoid this. You can have metabolic issues caused by certain nutrient deficiencies. So if you're low in like iodine, selenium, if you end up with sort of like thyroid suppression, that type of thing, these can impact metabolism, but it's extremely rare, okay? In every case that I have seen over the last decade of coaching where someone has been struggling to lose fat, it's because they couldn't stick to the calories required for them to lose it, not because the calories required for them to lose it were lower than they thought it needed to be, okay? Almost everyone that we coach ends up actually starting on more calories than they think they're eating because we do a really good job of making sure they fully adhere to those calories, okay? So it is almost always adherence and ability to stick to the plan that limits people's fat loss phases, not metabolic rate, okay? So metabolic rate does slow as we diet down, but then the opposite is also true. When you are gaining weight and have an excess of calories going in, your body tends to be less efficient with extracting all of the nutrition from them. So, you can add more and more calories, metabolism goes more quickly, but we also see slightly less efficient digestion. And then obviously the flip side is true when we're dieting. Digestive emptying process takes longer, and we basically squeeze all the calories that we can out of the available food. So the body does adjust. It slows down a little bit when dieting, metabolic rate speeds up a little bit when we are bulking or gaining muscle. But the majority of change in terms of energy expenditure comes from two things: change in body weight and change in exercise or change in physical activity. So what we see here is that when we diet down, our energy tends to drop a little bit and we subconsciously fidget a little bit less. This is why we always use a step tracking methodology, because it means that we can deliberately maintain a high level of energy expenditure when dieting. Otherwise, you get this compensatory effect where you reduce the amount of food going in, your body reduces subconsciously the amount of calories that you burn by fidgeting less, moving a bit less, spending more time just being still. You burn fewer calories. So it may look, my metabolism has been like artificially suppressed here by the calorie gods, but what's actually happening is, look, you just move a little bit less, and that is a component of metabolism, but it's not the component that most people think is being adjusted. They see things just being burnt more slowly, but actually we are just burning fewer calories, so we don't need as much energy, and as a result we often move out of a calorie deficit. Like I say, you can end up with nutrient deficiencies, but these don't tend to be the reason people aren't losing weight. It is usually just they cannot stick to the number of calories required to keep them in a deficit, and that number is very, very rarely as low as people think it needs to be. You could lose weight on more calories than you think if you were fully adherent to your diet. So let's talk through some myths regarding metabolism. Myth number one is always this thing that you can eat smaller and more frequent meals in order to ramp up your metabolic rate. This is absolute rubbish. If you equate calories and macro and micronutrients, it wouldn't make any difference whether you ate 1 meal a day or 6 meals a day. It is total energy consumption across that day. We might see a minor benefit of spreading it out more in terms of protein spacing, which over a long enough time frame would lead to better composition outcomes than that 1 meal a day. Okay, if you have more muscle, you will burn more calories, but that is a pretty small impact. In fact, building muscle actually gives you only about an extra 6 calories per pound of muscle built per day. So if you gain 10 pounds of muscle, which is huge, it's only an extra 60 calories or like half a Kit Kat. So you're never going to turn your body into a fat burning furnace by gaining a bit of muscle. It doesn't really work like that, okay? Back to the nutrition myths. Metabolism boosting foods. Facebook or Instagram used to love these kind of like infographics, fat burning foods, and like pictures of like almonds or whatever. Now there are certain foods that very fractionally impact metabolism. Caffeine for one, capsicum, so spicy things, fractionally increases metabolic rate. Fiber increases thermic effect of food. So they have sort of slight different impacts, but none of these are going to be sort of significant enough to actually change how much body weight you lose over a period of like weeks. Over years, you may see a pound or so, okay? But they don't really make any difference. It all comes down to calorie balance. So what do we need to do in order to try and boost our metabolism, okay? So we mentioned that there are elements that we can control here in regards to like muscle growth, but they are very, very small. 10 pounds, 60 calories extra per day. It's not going to move the needle that much. But spending time in a surplus is going to have a pretty drastic independent effect, okay? If you're spending all your time dieting, your metabolism is going to slow a little bit. So it's important that you spend enough time in a surplus to let metabolism recover, and then make sure that you're starting your dieting phases with plenty of calories to play with. We like to make sure that our clients that have got to a decent start point with their body composition spend about a 3-to-1 ratio minimum of time in a surplus versus in a deficit. Whereas many people, when they first come to us, that ratio is inverted, spend most of their time dieting. So we've got building muscle, spending time in a surplus, and then we've got the real big hitters, which are move more, okay? The more you can move, that is a contributor of obviously metabolism, and it's the most easily controllable one that we've got access to here. So more steps, more exercise is definitely going to help in this respect, okay, but somewhat artificially. Then we've got a couple of things that people tend to underestimate. We've got sleep and stress. Now, sleep, as you may well know, has a huge impact on body composition, okay? And having a very, very high level of sleep debt or not getting enough sleep on a consistent basis will lead to some degree of metabolic suppression. Likewise, very, very high stress levels tend to lead to obviously higher cortisol. Cortisol in the short term is an energy liberation hormone, which means that it basically increases the rate at which we burn through fuel, which might sound like a good thing. However, many people have this slightly weird relationship with body weight and stress, where being stressed short period of time might lead to them suppressing their appetite. But over a long period of time, that hormonal shift can impact body composition quite drastically. And what we also see is that many people develop like emotional eating behaviors. So during periods of time when they're stressed, they tend to eat more. So what are the takeaways with this regarding metabolism? The biggest and most important thing is that you are not being limited almost certainly by your metabolism with your fat loss endeavors. It will probably be your ability to adhere to the number of calories required. That's often not as low as people think it is, okay? There are things you can do in order to improve your chances of having a good or fast metabolism, but most of them are just not spending your whole life dieting. There are no real hacks. There are some nutrient insufficiencies that can impact this, but that is very rarely the cause of the issue.